The first stage after putting the model together is to sand down all the plaster where we've filled in the cracks. You want to avoid putting too much plaster on because it actually fills in the texture on the cork. We need to sand it down before we paint. The next stage is the sanding sealer. We need to seal the surface of the cork to prevent the paint from soaking in and so spoiling the texture of the cork when we come to put the white paint on. So I use a spray varnish. It's called a plastic coat. It's very quick drying, and just rapidly spray the whole surface area with the varnish. So I'm coating every area that's going to have paint applied to it. And this varnish feels dry in, well, a few seconds really, but it's probably best to leave it about 30 minutes before applying any paint. I use spray paint for the white paint on this project. I'm rapidly spraying the model to give a thin but even coat of paint. We want to cover the whole area, but we want to avoid putting too much paint on, as this fills in all the cracks and the texture which we've got on the cork. This wall already has one coat of paint. I'm going to spray another coat on top. The second coat is usually needed to cover the areas missed on the first pass. 2 thin coats of paint is much better than 1 thick coat, as this retains the texture of the material. I need to spray the tops of the parapets a second time because they've got a bit of soot from where they were laser cut, and that takes 2 or 3 passes really to remove. The terrain surface is built up from 2 layers of cork, but any 10mm or even 9mm thick board would work, as each of those layers would give us one step on our contour. So draw around the baseline of the models so that when they're in the correct position, and then remove them. Add any extra parts you need to raise up the level so that the buildings are supported underneath. At this stage you can also shape the terrain a little bit by carving out the contours. I'm now going to put a plaster on the ground level. I mix up my own plaster using PVA wood glue. This is the standard wood glue that's used for woodworking. I mix this with sand and yellow ochre paint. I then apply it with a spatula. Now I put it on the ground, but I'm avoiding putting it in the areas where the buildings are located because I don't want to disturb that area. I want the buildings to be able to sit snugly and flat on the base surface. As you can see, it's quite a thick consistency. You can adjust the consistency by adding more sand or more glue. The rough texture from the sand and the glue is ideal for the next stage, which is a dry brushing. So when that plaster has dried, I dry brush with a buff or a caramel colour paint, and that brings out some of the texture. And then I do it again, which is what I'm showing here, with a very light cream colour to give a dusty appearance. So dry brushing uses very little paint, and it's applied with a very rapid brushing action. Notice the road in front of the wall. This is made by cutting a thin slice of expanded polystyrene and spray painting it with a brown spray. The paint dissolves the surface to give a rough texture. Then when it's dry, you can paint it with a wet black paint that falls into all the little pits and gives a shadow effect. This stage gives the walls an aged look and brings out that texture we have in the cork. Apply a wet black paint and then immediately wipe it off with a cloth. The paint fills in the cracks and creates shadows, so emphasizing the texture. The next picture shows the resulting finish. It's quite effective at imitating a plastered wall. Note how the wall has been cemented into place with a wet version of the ground plaster, and also the odd piece of grass paper or model foliage adds life to the model. Finally, just notice the end of the walls. I've actually shown where the walls have been built up with rock, and this I've done simply by taking a piece of broken polystyrene, slicing that off, so I've got a nice smooth back, sticking the smooth back to the end of the cork, and then just painting it to look like stones and rocks.